Thank you, Daisy Cake. Stop it. Tonight, we will be unveiling the top 10 books of 2025, according to me, Daisy X Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. First, some stats, because I know you love stats. I read a total of 52 books this year, not as many as last year, but of those books, I read 27 middle grade, 37 adult, and 1 YA. Genre-wise, I read 19 fantasy, 16 science fiction, and 16 horror, so fairly evenly divided. Oh, and 1 mystery, a middle grade mystery. Now, for my top 10, I only count adult and young adult. As many of you know, I write middle grade, and that means I do not review middle grade. Also, if I read multiple books in a series, I will only include the series once. Otherwise, the list would be filled with Dungeon Crawler Carl. Okay, enough chit-chat. Now you know how it works. Let's get started with... For number 10, it is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This was my Shove It or Shove It pick for February. Now, I chose this book out of the fantasy section, even though it's more of a horror. I had heard of the author Grady Hendrix before, but I had never read anything by him, so I was very happy that his reputation lived up to my experience because I really enjoyed this historical horror. Now, it is historical, apparently, because it is set way back in the year of 1970. Honestly, that's in my lifetime, so I don't really consider 1970 historical, but maybe I'm just that old. Back in those ancient days, there were homes for pregnant teenage girls where they were placed to give birth and have their babies taken away for adoption. And that's the setting for Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. And this was personal to me because my biological mother was in one of these homes. Anyway, the story is about Fern, who was placed in one of these homes in Florida to secretly have her baby and hopefully return home with no one the wiser. But she meets a mysterious traveling librarian who gives her a book on witchcraft, and the magic works. If you are into horror books on witchcraft and historical books exploring homes for pregnant teens, you will absolutely love Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. For number 9, I picked Play Nice by Rachel Harrison. This was a recent Shove It or Shove It pick, and by recent, I mean this month. It was my December pick. Now, this is a horror book, but the horror here isn't that dark. I mean, it's dark, but nothing crazy. What really works, at least for me, is the character study of Cleo, the youngest of 3 daughters, of a woman who wrote an infamous book in a house possessed by a demon. Cleo was such a fun person to read. She's an influencer. She has a wicked sense of humor. As a reader, it feels like, at least at the beginning, that Cleo has a real understanding of who she is. When her mother dies, her mother leaves the haunted house or possessed house to her daughters. Nobody believes it's possessed or haunted, especially Cleo, but Cleo decides she wants to renovate the house for content because, she's an influencer. Now, even though I said Cleo is likable, she is also seriously flawed. She's selfish, self-centered, self-absorbed, conceited, even a little bit mean. Yeah, she's kind of a mean. She has a very complicated relationship with her 2 older sisters and her father. Anyway, the more she stays in the possessed house, the more she gets convinced that maybe her mother was right all along, that there is something evil living in the house. Again, this is not over-the-top horror, but if you like books that focus on a fun character to read who's going through a bit of a dark supernatural turn, check out by Rachel Harrison. For number 8, I picked Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement. I picked this book from my Retro Hugo series, and it is the only Retro Hugo on this list. Now, it's fun reading Golden Age science fiction, but for me, the writing seems a little bit undercooked. So remember, the Golden Age of science fiction was when authors were just figuring out what the shape of science fiction would look like. So this is really the only book that made it on the list for me. Anyway, Mission of Gravity was a nominee for the 1954 Retro Hugos. This is hard science fiction, as hard as you can get, about humans losing a very expensive probe on the planet Mescaline that has such a high gravity that it can't be retrieved. So they contact the natives of the planet, who look like centipedes, and they grow to be a little bit over a foot long and can withstand the gravity that can get up to 665 Gs. What's so fun about this book is we don't really follow the humans, but the alien, the Mescalinite Barlanin, who is a merchant captain on a ship that travels the methane seas. And by ship, I mean a raft. If you love hard science fiction, and especially if you are, like me, really interested in reading about aliens, you've got to check out Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement. Number 7 is The Book That Held Her Heart by Mark Lawrence. This is the final book in Lawrence's library trilogy. This should come as no surprise to anyone who follows me, because last year, The Book That Held Her Heart was also on the list. And way back in 2023, the first book in the series, The Book That Wouldn't Burn, was number 1 in my list for 2023. I think 3 is the perfect number for a fantasy series. I did a whole video on why and did a deep dive into the library trilogy. The story starts off as what seems to be a traditional epic fantasy. A young girl has her family and her entire town destroyed by monsters, and she ends up becoming an apprentice in a magical library that has parts that seem endless that go across time and space. There's a wizened mentor who is an ancient librarian, then a little bit of a nod to Narnia. But then the story goes completely off the rails, subverting normal fantasy. I think the library trilogy is a masterpiece. Check it out. Number 6 may surprise you because I really talked about Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. It is the latest Hunger Games book and the only young adult book I read this year. I am a big fan of Suzanne Collins. I personally think the Hunger Games trilogy could be marketed as an adult series, at least in terms of the writing and the story. The only thing young adult about it is the main character is a teenager. If you have been living under a rock, The Hunger Games is about a dystopian society of Panem, which is divided between the capital, where the elites live, and the 12 districts that serve the capital. At some point in the past, a war broke out, which the elites won, and they pretty much have enslaved the 12 districts. Every year, 2 children from each district, a boy and a girl, are chosen to compete in the Hunger Games, where they fight to the death. Sunrise on the Reaping is the second prequel, the first being The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I also liked. That book, Songbirds and Snakes, is sort of an anti-hero story of Coriolanus Snow, who in the later series becomes President Snow, the evil ruler of Panem. Sunrise on the Reaping is a little bit later than that and is about Hamish Abernathy, who in the original series is the District 12 drunken mentor to Katniss and Peeta, because he was the only living winner from District 12. His story describes how Maybe he was actually a bit of a revolutionary before he became the drunk, cynical mentor that we knew from the trilogy. Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins is another really great entry into the Hunger Games universe. And if you are a fan, check it out. If you haven't read the Hunger Games, check out the first book. Even if you don't normally read young adult, I think you'll be surprised. Number 5 is Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. This was my Shelve It or Shove It pick for September. T. Kingfisher is one of my favorite authors. I love her books and her retellings, and this book is no different. It is a completely fresh look on Snow White, which is an incredible achievement because, as you know, Snow White has been done to death. Yet somehow, Kingfisher finds a way to create a completely unexpected new story, starting with the fact that the main character is not Snow White, but Snow White's physician, a woman who is a poison expert named Anja. Anja is reluctantly recruited by the king to help cure his daughter Snow. And Anja finds herself in this castle with these silver mirrors that may hold more than what is reflected in the room. This is so good, so much fun, so enjoyable. Another proof of how freaking talented T. Kingfisher is in crafting unique stories that are just a complete joy to read. Even if you're not a fan of fairy tale retellings, I think you should check out Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. Number 4 is actually a series. Way back in January, I picked Days of Shattered Faith by Adrian Tchaikovsky for Shelve It or Shove It because the cover is amazing. It turned out to be the third book in his Tyrant Philosopher series, so I started with the first book, City of Last Chances, and I didn't really plan to read further than that, but I immediately had to pick up the second book, House of Open Wounds, and then Days of Shattered Earth. What I love about this series is it's not a traditional epic fantasy. Each book can be read as a standalone, even though characters from prior books may make an appearance. The stories are about this dystopian Palestine government as it attempts to colonize every nation around them and imprint their philosophy of perfection, anti-religion, and bring about a new world order. But people are people, and even high-ranking members of Palestine don't always quite fit into this totalitarian society. The first book is about the recent conquest of Ilmar, the city of lost chances, and the magical forest next to it that the Palestinians can't seem to control, and a revolution that stirs up among the locals, including a priest who is the only follower of this very small god, who we see in the second book, House of Open Wounds, which is in another part of the world, basically a Palestine MASH unit, a mobile army surgical hospital, which turns up again in the Days of Shattered Faith. I know Tchaikovsky is more known for his science fiction, but I am absolutely wowed by his fantasy series. Check out The Tyrant Philosophers by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Number 3 is another series called Shadow of the Leviathan by Robert Jackson Bennett. Now, I picked up the first book, The Tainted Cup, because it won the Hugo Award and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. After reading it, I immediately picked up the second book, A Drop of Corruption, and I liked it even better than the first book. Now, just like The Tyrant Philosophers, which can be read as a standalone, so too can these books. In this case, these are cozy mysteries. Well, maybe not cozy, but these are mysteries in the vein of Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Only here, the genius detective is Anna Delabra, and the stories are told from her assistant's point of view, Din Cole. They both live in the Empire of Canem, which is constantly besieged by leviathans and ruled by a race of people who don't really exist anymore, or maybe one of them does. It's all very mysterious. The technology is all biological, where reagents and strange alchemy can change plants, animals, and people. Din has been altered to be able to recall anything he sees and hears. Anna has been altered, maybe? Who knows? It's another mystery. Both books start as murder mysteries, which again, I think you can read as standalones, but each book also reveals more and more about this intricate and amazing world. Number 2 is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Denizen. I'm talking about the entire series, and yes, I know I am late to the party. Dungeon Crawler Carl began in 2020 as a lit RPG indie published book. It found a huge following and has been picked up by Ace Books, is getting a television deal, and has been turned into a graphic novel. And I believe there's also a computer game in the works. It's an amazing success story, and I was just curious about it, checked it out to see what the fuss was, and fell head over heels in love. It is this genre blend between science fiction and fantasy. I mean, logically, it's science fiction because it starts with aliens killing everyone on Earth who happens to be indoors. All the buildings are flattened, and all the survivors are rounded up and placed in an underground world where they are forced to be part of a game. Each book is 1 or 2 levels, I think usually 1 level of the game. The dungeon, where the main character Carl, an average Joe with a heart of gold, and his cat, yes, I said cat, Princess Donut. Princess Donut has been uplifted to sentience, yet she retains all her snarky superiority that she has as a cat. Lit RPG means the story includes a ton of gaming elements, leveling, skill, stats, abilities, that sort of thing, buffs, debuffs. None of that, in my opinion, distracts from the story. I think it actually enhances the story. So I get it. I get the love for Carl, for Princess Donut. I've been trying not to read all the books at once, but to space them out and only pick them up when I'm in a reading slump. But it's hard to do because they are so addictive. I've read 5 books, the original Dungeon Crawler Carl, then Carl's Doomsday Scenario, the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, The Gate of the Feral Gods, and The Butcher's Masquerade. That's 5 books, and there's only 2 more books, at least at the time that I'm recording this, so I'm going to try to control myself and not pick them up right away, but save them for the right time so I can savor the stories. My number 1 book of 2025 is a complete surprise because I just read it this month as my ugly duckling book. I'm talking about Sunbirth by Anne Yu. This is proof that you should not judge a book by the cover because the cover on this one stinks on ice. Now, this is literary science fiction. Maybe you wouldn't even call it science fiction. It reads a bit like a fever dream. Now, I will tell you right away that this book is not for everyone. It does not have a strong plot. It is definitely more character-driven than plot-driven. It is about a woman who is an herbalist or pharmacist living in the village of 5 Poems. The sun is slowly disappearing. A sliver of the sun vanishes every couple of weeks, and it's getting colder, and the heads of some people are turning into little mini suns, which makes them act kind of like mindless zombies. We never know who the woman's name is, but her sister is Dongji, a massage therapist across town who wants to leave the village. Now, I compare this to Samuel R. Delaney's Dahlgren, which is a slice of life literary experiment about a city that exists outside of time. Sunbirth has also been compared with Murakami, which I get. It definitely feels to me like a meditation on the relationships between people, whether they are your family or just acquaintances, the people you bump into going about your everyday life. But most especially, it's about the relationship with the places we live in. Now, like a lot of literary novels I read, it's either love it or hate it. And if I love it, it's kind of hard to articulate why. It just touches me on a level that I don't quite understand. And that's the case here with Sunbirth by Anne Yu. There you have it, my top 10 list of 2025. Obviously, many of these picks came from my BookTube series, Shelve It or Shove It, and one from my Retro Hugo series. And there were several books that I read that I didn't talk about outside of my Get Ready With Me live streams. So I want to know what you think of my top 10 list. Were there books on there that surprised you? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.